Welcome to Insights Live. I'm Rebecca Selby. Right now, I'm joined by Bob Eastman, Senior Research Analyst at Technology Evaluation Centers. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Rebecca. Nice to be with you.
Glad that you're here. What do you think of Insights so far?
I think it's exciting. Man, this is a big show. This is my first time coming to the Epicor show, and I can't believe how big it is. I can't believe how much there's going on. There's a lot of sessions to go to, so it's an exciting event.
So let's talk about the supply chain. It's adapting rapidly as global business changes. So can you tell me about trends that are coming?
Yeah, there's so much going on in the supply chain field right now, and I think what's driving a lot of it is just the acceleration of the business cycle. Everything is having to happen faster, and so what we see are companies trying to keep up. Business cycles are going faster. Companies are feeling pressure to make decisions faster, and so they're having to respond faster. And of course, what's complicating it all is big data. Everyone's heard about that, so that makes everyone's life a bit more complicated, and everyone's trying to deal with that. So that's one of the trends. There's a couple of enabling trends we're seeing a lot of. Cloud, everyone's heard of that, and that's making its way into the supply chain areas selectively, not in all sectors of the supply chain, but in certain areas. A couple would be global trade management, transportation planning. We're seeing the cloud come in, sales and operations planning to some extent. And another enabling technology, Rebecca, would be mobility, and everyone's heard about that. And so, people want to do more and more on their devices, and that's also making its presence felt in the supply chain sector.
And how do you see companies responding to that?
Well, they're struggling. I mean, they're struggling in the sense that they know they have to do everything faster. And so a lot of that is automation. A lot of it is, I'll pick out one area, demand sensing.
Okay.
One of the things that companies are challenged with is how quickly can we sense that demand signal that's coming into our company? And of course, that's sort of where it all begins, is the demand. And so companies are trying ever harder to see that demand signal more quickly.
Okay.
And so it's really, trying to tune their supply chains, trying to sense things faster, and then trying to respond to those signals more quickly.
So what can companies do to implement best practices into their supply chain strategy?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of strategy and technology.
Okay.
Those things have to go hand in hand. If you don't have a good strategy, more technology is not going to do you much good.
And vice versa, I would imagine.
And vice versa. So it really goes hand in hand. Companies really need to look end to end at their supply chain and say, okay, how sound is our strategy? What is it we're trying to accomplish here? And then sort of align technology to that. And that's an ongoing struggle for a lot of companies, and probably, I would say even more so, when you're talking about the small to medium sized business or the mid-market. It becomes even more of a challenge there.
Can you talk to me a little bit about change management strategy? Supply chain management strategy?
Yes. There again, it's really, companies are trying to achieve supply chain excellence, and that's an ongoing pursuit. I don't really talk about achieving supply chain excellence the way some people do. I talk about in terms of pursuing supply chain excellence, because that's really an ongoing struggle. And there are several pieces to that. A major piece of that is having end-to-end visibility, and that is an ongoing challenge for companies, both inside the four walls, and if you can imagine, once you look outside the four walls, having more visibility outside your four walls is even more challenging. So that's sort of a baseline requirement that companies have to do. And then there's, I'll mention a couple of technologies that are really strategic. And one of those is what we call sales and operations planning.
Okay.
So if you're trying to pursue supply chain excellence, one of the basic things you have to do is the sales and operations planning, which is aligning your resources to the demand.
Okay.
And so sales and operations planning is a fairly formal process where you get all the critical resources inside the company together, sales, marketing, and operations, and once a month they get in a room and they say, what do we need to send out and what are we going to use to meet that need? So interestingly, Rebecca, I just came out of a session this morning and I was very interested to see that one of the Epicor people leading the session asked the people in the room how many people were doing sales and operations planning, and in a room of maybe 50 or 60 people, I think 2 hands went up. So this tells me that this is a real opportunity for, I would say, mid-market companies, is to take a look at sales and operations planning. Right now, probably companies are doing it in pen and paper, and there's some very good technologies that are going to help facilitate that. One of them is Epicor partner Rockysoft, and Rockysoft talked this morning about trying to come up with a technology for the mid-market companies. So visibility is key. Something like sales operations planning is key for supply chain excellence. And a lot of companies, Rebecca, try to use metrics to sort of measure what's going on in the supply chain. You have visibility, now how do you measure it? And those would probably be three things. And in the area of metrics, I would just say companies need to use caution there. I can't tell you how many conversations we've had with supply chain metrics, and metrics have a way of becoming the end result, the means, and what you find are people gaming the system. So metrics, we need to be a little bit careful, but that would be another key, Rebecca.
So you said in that session that there were only a couple of companies that raised their hand. What do you think is going to drive more companies to jump on board?
Well, as we were talking about a couple minutes ago, companies know they need to respond faster, they need to make decisions faster, and they need to sense things faster. And sales operations planning is sort of an integration point within the company because it brings together those business functions I was talking about once a month, all in the same room to sort of align things. Now without that, these companies are having to do it, but they can't do it as quickly as if you have a structured process and enabling technology to help you with that structured process.
So you're saying
that's going to drive companies to it,
pure
I think,
necessity
Rebecca.
to do it more quickly.
That's right, that's right. It's going to be competitive pressure. It's going to be also pressure from their customers. Their customers are going to demand, and we see it all the time, Rebecca. Customers are demanding more, their expectations are higher, they expect you to respond more quickly, higher on-time delivery, faster delivery. We're seeing that all over the place. And so it becomes a requirement, I think, to look at something like sales operations planning.
So how do you think companies can reduce the number of potential failure points in their supply chain?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because every supply chain has a lot of possible failure points. Part of it goes back to technology. You automate where you can. Where you can't, you have to look at those handoffs really carefully. If you look at your entire supply chain end to end, there's friction points. There's things that you might call bottlenecks, things that get held up for approvals, or there's a piece of paper flowing from one person to another. And to the extent that you can, you've got to eliminate those. So it's really, looking at all those where there's a manual intervention, looking to see if there's inefficiency there that can be addressed, and looking to see if there's a piece of technology that can be put in, or just making for a smoother handoff. You've got to watch those really carefully, and that's where a lot of the inefficiency in the supply chain comes in. Collaboration is an overused term in the supply chain. It gets used all the time, but it's really collaborating more closely. And that collaboration will remove or smooth out a lot of those friction points, as we call them.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your input.
Rebecca, it was great joining you. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. If you have any questions about the things we've covered today, please visit epicor.com.